Bonjour tout le monde. On conclut aujourd'hui une visite qui m'a d'abord amené à Paris pour un sommet sur l'intelligence artificielle. En 2018, la dernière fois que le Canada a présidé le G7, j'ai mis l'IA au cœur de l'agenda. Avec la France, on a ensuite lancé le partenariat mondial sur l'intelligence artificielle qui rassemble aujourd'hui 44 membres. Cette année, le Canada préside encore une fois le G7 et on va continuer de travailler sur l'intelligence artificielle avec une approche basée sur 3 piliers. Alimenter l'IA avec des énergies vertes, encourager son adoption par les PME et inclure les économies émergentes dans cette révolution technologique. À Paris, j'ai eu l'occasion de parler de l'importance de développer ces technologies de façon responsable et sécuritaire et de s'assurer qu'elles soient mises au service de la classe moyenne. J'en ai aussi profité pour mettre à l'avant des exceptionnels entrepreneurs, travailleurs, chercheurs et innovateurs qu'on a chez nous au Canada. Ici à Bruxelles, j'ai eu la chance de m'entretenir avec le président du Conseil européen, Antonio Costa, et la présidente de la Commission européenne, mon amie Ursula von der Leyen. J'ai aussi rencontré le secrétaire général de l'OTAN, Mark Rutte. On a parlé de l'importance de notre soutien à l'Ukraine, de la participation du Canada aux opérations de l'OTAN en Lettonie et des initiatives canadiennes dans l'Arctique, notamment à travers notre pacte de collaboration sur les brises-glaces avec les États-Unis et la Finlande, le fameux Ice Pact. J'ai aussi réaffirmé l'engagement du Canada d'atteindre la cible de 2% du PIB dédié à la défense dans les années à venir. Un engagement que j'ai pris d'ailleurs pour la première fois à Washington en juillet dernier. Rappelons-nous que sous le dernier gouvernement conservateur, les dépenses militaires du Canada représentaient moins de 1% du PIB. Entre 2015 et 2030, notre gouvernement aura triplé le budget accordé à la défense. La visite de cette semaine fait partie d'un effort pour renforcer nos partenariats avec des alliés comme l'Union européenne et d'approfondir notre engagement envers les institutions internationales qui sont garantes depuis 8 décennies de notre prospérité fondée sur la paix. Partnerships and institutions like NATO are built upon trust. Trust that when times get tough, we can count on each other, because you can always count on Canada. Our economic partnerships must also be deepened to allow for further growth, to create more opportunities for our workers and entrepreneurs, to give more choice to consumers, and to strengthen the middle class. That's what we're doing elsewhere in the world with our Indo-Pacific strategy, the CPTPP, and free trade agreements we've recently negotiated with Ecuador and Indonesia, among others. That's what we'll achieve here with the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement that has already increased trade between our countries by 66% over the past 9 years. When, in 2016, we signed both CETA and Canada's strategic partnership with Europe, nobody knew just how much turmoil lay ahead of us. In the following years, this strengthened collaboration, on top of its economic benefits, has been crucial as we work to protect the health and safety of our citizens during the pandemic and to support the Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom, justice, and democracy. Un des nombreux exemples de l'impact stratégique et économique de ces liens, de plus en plus profonds, est l'achat par l'Union européenne de bombardiers à eau produits par l'entreprise canadienne de Havilland qui combattent aujourd'hui les feux de forêt à travers l'Europe. Only a few weeks ago, I attended the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. This visit was another reminder of the importance of these partnerships, of international institutions that, in the past decades, have made the difference between prosperity and poverty, between war and peace. We cannot take these institutions for granted. We must renew and deepen our engagement towards them. That's what we're doing here today. In turbulent times, we all need reliable, trustworthy partners, and that's what Canada is. That's who Canadians are. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go over questions from reporters. Hi, Rachel Aiello, CTV News. What was J.D. Vance's response when you brought up steel in Ohio, and did you two talk about anything else?
It was just a quick greeting exchange. I highlighted that $2.2 billion worth of steel and aluminum exports from Canada go directly into the Ohio economy, often to contribute to manufacturing that happens there. He nodded and noted it, but it wasn't a longer exchange than that. But it is part of the Team Canada effort that wherever Canadians are, whether it's premiers in Washington today or officials or ministers exchanging with their counterparts in the U.S. administration, we bring up just how interconnected our countries are. And the fact, for example, that we're talking about potential job losses in the U.S. Based on these tariffs on steel and aluminum is not mere speculation. We know that that will happen because that's exactly what happened last time tariffs were brought in on steel and aluminum in 2018. There were job losses in the United States. 75,000 fewer jobs in the U.S. because of tariffs they brought in on steel and aluminum, and those tariffs were even lower than the ones they're contemplating bringing in right now. So anytime we have an opportunity, we will be highlighting those facts and doing everything we can to prevent moving forward with this policy that will hurt both Americans and Canadians.
And a series of world leaders have gone to the White House to meet with President Trump since his return. Have you had any conversations with him about you going down to D.C., trying to sort out your tensions in person?
We have talked about that. As you know, we have had many different conversations over the past many months, including two pretty important ones last week. We will continue to engage at all levels and make the case that Canada, as an ally and a partner, is a country that they want to continue to work constructively and productively with as we take on big challenges on the global stage.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Valérie Gavache de Radio-Canada. Concernant les tarifs, est-ce que la Maison-Blanche vous a fait des demandes, quand on parle d'une exemption, est-ce qu'il y a des demandes qui ont été faites ou vous naviguez à l'aveugle actuellement?
C'est un peu les conversations qu'on est en train d'avoir maintenant avec l'administration américaine. Mais je comprends que les gens soient peut-être un peu inquiets parce qu'il y a beaucoup de différentes conversations sur les tarifs qui s'en viennent. Si on réfléchit, il y a 3 différentes menaces de tarifs sous lesquelles le Canada est actuellement pris. On a d'abord les tarifs de 25% et de 10% sur l'énergie à cause du fentanyl, même si on souligne que moins de 1% du fentanyl qui arrive aux États-Unis passe par le Canada. Il y a du travail à faire. On a 30 jours pour démontrer qu'effectivement, même si c'est un très petit problème, on est en train encore plus de le réduire. Ça, c'est les premiers tarifs. Les deuxièmes tarifs, en ordre chronologique, ce serait ces tarifs sur l'acier et l'aluminium, où il parle de 25% sur l'acier et sur l'aluminium. Ça, c'est pour quelques jours plus tard, à la mi-mars. Et à ce niveau-là, on est en train de souligner à quel point, oui, il y a eu des pertes d'emplois importantes aux États-Unis, la dernière fois qu'ils ont amené des tarifs sur l'acier et l'aluminium, et que c'est quelque chose qui vient miner la croissance et la prospérité des États-Unis. On va faire ces arguments-là. Ça, c'est les deuxièmes tarifs sous lesquels on est en situation. Et la troisième série de tarifs, c'est les tarifs qui ont comme but, comme échéance, le 1er avril, dont ils ont parlé dans le America First Trade Policy, qu'il a signé lors de l'inauguration, qui là parle de déséquilibre dans les échanges commerciaux, des déficits, des surplus. Et ils sont en train de faire des études dans le département du commerce. Ils vont faire des recommandations pour des tarifs à ce niveau-là. Alors, je comprends que tout a l'air interconnecté, mais nous, on est en train de parler directement et de façon stratégique avec nos partenaires dans l'administration américaine pour souligner à quel point ces 3 séries de tarifs vont finir par faire mal aux emplois américains, vont faire mal aux Américains, en plus de faire mal aux Canadiens, à un moment où on devrait être en train de travailler ensemble.
Et puis, sur l'Ukraine, il y a le secrétaire à la Défense américain qui, un peu plus tôt, a dit c'est un peu illusoire de penser qu'on va revenir à des frontières pré-2014 en Ukraine, que, dans le fond, on devrait arrêter là, de se faire croire que c'est possible. Est-ce que pour vous, c'est un peu de dire, ben finalement, la bataille est perdue là, en Ukraine?
On a toujours été très, très clair. La position canadienne, c'est que c'est l'Ukraine qui va décider quel serait acceptable comme résultat de négociations comme plan de paix. Nous, on est là pour l'appuyer, l'Ukraine, dans leur souveraineté, dans leur défense de la démocratie. Je comprends que les gens peuvent avoir toutes sortes de différentes perspectives et opinions, mais pour nous, c'est la décision que prendront les Ukrainiens qui est nécessaire. One of the things Canada has been very clear about is that it is only Ukrainians that get to decide what is acceptable to them as an outcome of any peace negotiations. Obviously, people will have different perspectives around strategies, around positionings, but for us, it's very simple. Ukrainians are busy defending their sovereignty, their democracy. They're busy standing up for the rule of law as it applies in all of our democracies. Ukrainians get to decide what the outcome of that peace process must be.
Next question.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. The White House says that the total tariffs on aluminum and steel could be 50%. What's your response to that, and why do you think that President Trump continues to escalate his threats?
I think it's important to understand that Canada will respond as appropriate in a calibrated but extremely strong way, regardless of what the U.S. moves forward with. We don't want to be in a trade dispute. We think that the best thing for all of us in North America is to continue to work together to focus on some of the international trade challenges, whether it be non-market economies or rising authoritarian economies, that need to be countered by friends and allies working together on energy, on AI, on critical minerals, on the kinds of things that we can do to create shared prosperity across not just our continent, but all Western democracies. This is our focus. If we have to take some time to put that on pause while we stand up for Canadian jobs, while we stand up unequivocally for Canadian sovereignty, we'll do that. It's not our choice. We don't want to be doing that, but we will, regardless of the level of tariffs that eventually the administration might move forward on. We will be equally unequivocal in our response. Je pense que ce qu'il faut comprendre, c'est que quel que soit le niveau de tarif avec lequel l'administration pourrait s'avancer, on va répondre de façon équivalente et forte. Il n'y a aucune question qu'on ne veut pas être là. On ne veut pas être en train d'avoir une dispute commerciale avec notre plus grand partenaire et ami, à un moment où on devrait être en train de travailler ensemble pour bâtir la sécurité énergétique, pour livrer plus de minéraux critiques, de faire croître nos économies et de compétitionner de façon de plus en plus forte avec des endroits dans le monde qui posent des fois une menace à notre bien-être économique ou même démocratique. On devrait être en train de travailler ensemble en tant qu'amis. Mais s'ils insistent qu'on va d'abord devoir passer à travers un moment de dispute entre alliés et amis, on va être là, en tant que Canadiens, fermes, là pour défendre nos emplois, nos principes, nos valeurs, notre souveraineté. Et une fois qu'on passera à travers des moments qui seront pénibles et pour les Américains et les Canadiens s'ils vont de l'avant avec des tarifs, on espérait pouvoir reprendre les partenariats qui vont être bons pour nos deux pays.
Said that it's a real thing that Trump wants to annex Canada. How serious or urgent would you classify that threat?
Let's be very clear. Conversations around a 51st state are a non-starter. It's never going to happen. But we have to take seriously what the president is saying and fold that into our thinking as we continue to stand up for Canada.
Next question.
Laissez-moi être très, très clair. Il n'y aura jamais de 51e État au Canada. Ça ne se passera pas. Mais en même temps, il faut qu'on prenne au sérieux les propos de M. Trump pour pouvoir passer à travers ces moments.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with Global. Following up on Ashley's point, when Mr. Trump started talking about Canada being a 51st state, your government's original response was to say that it was a joke. Now you're saying that this is a real thing. Can you take us into your mindset? What was the moment that made you switch from thinking it's a joke to a real
I
thing?
don't think there's a switch. I think, as I've said unequivocally from the beginning, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state. At the same time, from having worked with President Trump for over 8 years now, I can tell you that we have to take seriously what he says and make sure we're responding appropriately. And quite frankly, the response of Canadians over these past weeks has been inspiring, as people have been there for each other, people have been changing their vacation plans, people have been looking at ways to buy Canadian, to support local businesses, to diversify their supply chains to places like Europe and Asia. This is a response of Canadians who are saying, yeah, this is going to be tough, but we're going to double down on Canadian pride and standing up for each other.
Trump again talked about Canada's defense spending, and at one point he said, we don't pay so much when it comes to defense spending. This is a quote, because they assume that the U.S. is going to protect Canada, and that's not an assumption that they can make. If there was to be an attack on Canada, would you expect that the U.S. would respond and defend Canada?
We are all members of NATO. I had a great meeting with the Secretary General of NATO this morning, and we're part of an alliance that is there to stand up for each other. And I will highlight that Canada does take very seriously its responsibilities around defense, not just of Canada, but of North America. NORAD is the only alliance in the world where two countries have agreed to work together to protect their own homeland, their own territory. There's no other place in the world where two countries work together, and we both do our share of it. We've actually recently invested even more, tens of billions of dollars in modernization of NORAD, because we understand that the world is changing. The peace dividends following the end of the Cold War are over. We need to be investing more in defense. That's why when we took office in 2015 and saw that defense spending was below 1% from the previous Conservative government, we started massively investing in defense, and we're on track to triple our defense spending between 2015 and 2030. And we have a solid and real plan to reach 2% in the coming years. This is something we have taken seriously, and we agree with all our allies, including the United States, that Canada needs to do more. That's why we are doing more. Le Canada comprend à quel point c'est important d'être dans une alliance avec les États-Unis, non seulement par l'OTAN, mais aussi par le NORAD. C'est le seul endroit au monde où deux pays souverains s'engagent à s'entraider pour défendre leur propre continent. Le Canada fait sa part depuis des décennies, les États-Unis, évidemment, font leur part aussi. Et nous avions investi très récemment presque 40 milliards de dollars, dans un plan de 40 milliards de dollars, pour en faire plus, pour moderniser NORAD. On comprend à quel point c'est important d'en faire plus en défense, et c'est exactement ce qu'on fait.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Olivia Stefanovich, CBC Radio. You spent the last few days speaking with allies here in Europe, but we haven't heard those allies specifically make public statements defending Canada's sovereignty. Where are these allies? Why aren't they standing up for Canada?
I think allies understand, having seen it on TV, seeing even across, I have many people talking about how patriotic Canadians have become, how strong and forceful Canadians are at waving the flag these past days. People have been noting and actually impressed by how Canadians have all come together in a very strong way. And I can sort of say, as I said, Canadians don't need anyone else telling us that we have a great country, because we know that, and other countries are also taking note.
Can NATO survive Trump, given that he's threatened the sovereignty of Greenland and Canada?
I'm sorry, Olivia, I'm getting a flashback right now because that was a question we answered, got asked and answered many times over the first Donald Trump mandate. Where there were questions about whether Article 5 would be respected, whether NATO had a future. And here we are all these years later, continuing to commit to mutual defense, continue to invest significantly more in defense than we were 8 years ago. Yes, Donald Trump has had, along with the impact of shifting geopolitics, a spurring effect on just about all countries to do more on defense, to recognize that we are in a more challenging and unstable world. But that's exactly where the value of military alliances like NATO being the most successful military alliance in history, is all the more visible and all the more important in a world like this.
But don't these sovereignty threats go against what NATO stands for? Isn't this new?
Donald Trump has always been someone who has challenged ways of doing things or various conventions around what gets negotiated or what gets said about one country or another. I think we need to focus on the core of the issue, which is we need to be able to be there to defend our sovereignty, defend our democracies, and support our partners. That's what we're all committed to.
Last question.
Il y a 8 ans, on a eu beaucoup de questionnements aussi avec l'arrivée de Donald Trump la première fois sur si l'OTAN allait survivre à la présidence de Donald Trump. Non seulement l'OTAN a survécu à la première présidence de Donald Trump, on a fait beaucoup plus d'investissements pour renforcer et même pour agrandir l'OTAN. C'est l'alliance militaire la plus réussie dans l'histoire du monde. Et on continue à être profondément engagé et on continue de comprendre à quel point c'est important de continuer à investir pour pouvoir défendre nos valeurs et notre territoire et notre souveraineté dans un monde de plus en plus déstabilisé et déstabilisant.
Last question.
Hello, Prime Minister. Anya Kadadeglia, the Canadian Press. You met with the NATO Secretary General today. What conversations did you have about the kinds of investments that would qualify towards Canada's defense spending? And would you or NATO consider Canada's investments in critical minerals as eligible?
The NATO framework for evaluating defense spending as a portion of GDP is very, very well established. There are reams of documents that lay out what can be counted and what can't be. We've been working closely with NATO and other allies to make sure that count is correct. But rather than focusing on, where the numbers are or where the exact percentages are, what's important is that we be investing significantly in the kinds of things that are going to keep Canadians and all our NATO partners more safe. The capacities that are important, investing in infrastructure in the Arctic, investing in being there to protect NATO's eastern flank with Latvia, investing to strengthen our NORAD defenses, investing in new submarines, in 88 new fighter jets, in more icebreakers, and signing the Ice Pact. It is the capacities and the abilities of Canadian servicemen and women and the equipment they rely on that is most important. So yes, we're going to continue to make sure that the investments get recognized by NATO, but we're going to stay focused on doing the things that actually matter for Canadians to not only protect our own sovereignty, but continue to be a strong and staunch ally in protecting our values and the sovereignty of partners around the world.
And you told a room of Canadian leaders last week that Donald Trump is not bluffing about Canada becoming a U.S. state, partially because he wants access to Canada's critical minerals. So what is Canada actually doing to protect its sovereignty in the face of these threats? And would you consider ending critical minerals agreements with the United States?
I think the fundamental principle is that Canada is a reliable, trustworthy source of energy, of critical minerals, of inputs and ingredients into their manufacturing processes, into their prosperity, that Americans can rely on. That any thickening of the border, any tariffs that get put on Canadian imports will hurt American manufacturing, will hurt American consumers, and we don't want that. We want to continue to work together. So we're going to continue to highlight that it is much better for us to work together, but if we're going to continually be facing threats of tariffs, or if we get actual tariffs, we will respond appropriately and strongly, stand up for Canadian jobs, stand up for Canadian workers, and pull Canadians together as we demonstrate that we want to be there as a partner, but we will be there as a sovereign country.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
What happened